median age is one that follows after Niger, which is approximately 16 years old. And in the recently concluded activities by Uganda Bureau of Statistics indicates that the country's current age, of course, stands at approximately 16 and the second youngest country in the world. That said, tonight we're discussing a very critical conversation which emanates or stems around why is it that the second youngest country in the world has a leadership that is largely dominated by the elderly. Now, joining me to discuss this very pertinent conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us unpack the conversation and put perspective to the topic. So in no particular order, I'll just introduce my panelists, but then they'll also go ahead and, do the same. But in no order, I'll start with my immediate right as I go to my extreme right. The lady next to me, she's called Nasazi Miracle. She's the 91st Deputy Speaker of Makerere University. You're most welcome and we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'm really humbled to be here.
Thank you. Right next to Miracle, we're joined by a gentleman who is yet now to be also a very common face on the show, goes by the names of Luwaga John Iliad. Luwaga John Iliad is a fourth-year student of law at Uganda Christian University. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Drake, for the opportunity to always be available to speak to people about things that actually help and develop this country. And I'm ready to actually be ready for this show.
Thank you. Looking forward to having an interesting conversation as always. Right next to Iliad, we have the 91st Deputy Prime Minister of Makerere University. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Your name is?
Precious
Nkurunziza. Thank you. That's a very complicated name.
Okay.
When you say Nkurunziza, it reminds me of my primary days and they ask, who is the president of Burundi? And you say, Pierre Emery Nkurunziza. It's a very complicated name, but we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Right next to the current Deputy Prime Minister of the Guild of Makerere is the Prime Minister Emeritus, Mr. Rodney Adoni. Most welcome.
Thank you very much, Drake. It's a pleasure to be here. Civic Space TV is home, and I'm glad to be back.
Thank you. Let me just stick with you, Prime Minister. The conversation right now is one that as an outgone Prime Minister of Makerere University, right now I know you're possibly now looking at national politics because you have primarily served almost all the levels, primary, secondary, university, and right now you're looking at, you know what, I'm done with university, now I need to cast my nets into national politics. But the reality at the moment is we have a country that has a median or that has a cabinet that is largely dominated by the elderly of approximately 64, 65 years old. That is our cabinet. And you have a population of approximately 78% being young people who are barely in parliament and only have hotspots, few hotspots of areas whereby we lead. That is the National Youth Council. And currently we have the National Youth Parliament, which falls under the armpits of an NGO, which is Faraja. And we have the Students' Umbrella under the Uganda National Students Association. But after looking at that context, tonight we're talking about why is it that a young population is largely led by the elderly. Your context, please.
Thank you very much, Drake. Firstly, I wish to convey my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the Catholic community that are mourning the recent passing of Pope Francis, a man that lived a life of service, a life of humility, and has undoubtedly left an indelible mark in the lives of many, and indeed inspired millions around the world, irrespective of what religious dominations they're inclined to. Now, to shift to the discussion of today, we are discussing why our leadership structure, or our political structure, is dominated largely by old people. Now, our leadership structure being largely dominated is in and of itself not as a result of age. If the assumption is that by elderly we mean ages of 60, 70, the age bracket between 60 and 90. In fact, this is a well-entrenched system that has been shaped by quite a number of factors. This is a dispensation that has been shaped by our past turbulent history. That is one. It is a system that has been reinforced by our governing laws. It is a system that has been protected by our institutions, but it's also a system that has been sustained by our cultural values and our traditional values. So for us to be in position to be able to wrap around our heads around this topic and be able to demystify the current political dispensation, it is important for us to reflect on the history, on our past turbulent history. If I may take you back to the post-independence era, this is an epoch that is largely known for a lot of chaos that happened, most notably during the regimes of His Excellency Milton Obote and Idi Amin Dada. It was a period that was marked by very many military coups and mutinies. It was a period that was marked by a lot of repression. This was a period of time where we had a lot of civil war. So generally it was a period of chaos and great tumult. And if we are to carefully examine the current political space and the current political actors, you will come to the ultimate realization that most of these players emerged from this period where there was a lot of chaos, where there was a lot of war during the liberation struggle. And so, during this time, the aftermath was that we saw the emergence of a mistrust for change and a tendency by those that fought and toppled governments to consolidate power and have since held a firm grip of power without letting it go. And so in 1986 is where we see the president of this country assuming the presidency of this country. Of course, by that time, led by the National Resistance Army, and he preached the gospel of liberation, of liberating this country. And it was also during this time that the president and his contemporaries have over time become synonymous with the state and created a sort of dominance on power and governance of this country. And it is through this dominance, it is through this particular dominance that has cultivated a political culture and an institutionalized mindset where old age has been equated to sacrifice, where old age has been equated to experience, where old age has sometimes been equated to entitlement to leadership. And so it is against that background, that brief historical context, that now we have seen the emergence of a political class that is so close-fisted with power, that has held onto a firm grip of power, and ultimately we have seen a sort of systematic ostracization of the youth from most of these leadership spaces. Now fast forward, recent statistics actually show that more than 75% of the country's populace is youth. This country is overwhelmingly youth, and those that are between the age brackets of 18 and 30 are 75%. And yet this is not reflected within our leadership structure. And ironically, when the MP of Western Uganda, the youth MP of Western Uganda, Honorable Rugumayo, was being interviewed, he actually noted that in the 11th Parliament, only about 12.3% of parliamentarians fall between the age bracket of 18 and 30.
So we are having a representation in the National Assembly of 13%, representing 75% of the country's population, that is between 18 and 35. But then also, another thing to note is that it is very unfathomable to have the majority group of people within this country being categorized as a special interest group. And this is a discussion I've always had with colleagues, that if we constitute 75% of this country's population, then why is there a need for us to be categorized as a special interest group? So now what we see today is a political class or a leadership model that is predominantly elderly, and we have seen that we are having very few youth that are actively engaged or meaningfully engaged within these particular processes.
All right, thank you. Rodney, you bring a very, very robust contextualization of our past, which has been largely turbulent, but which has also largely informed the political system that we have today. If you keenly follow almost every information that the president passes on via his X account, in almost every information he keeps on saying, us who fought in the war in 1986. And when you are making your argument, it just reminded me of every line or every argument that the president tries to make. He alludes it to the war, and he alludes it to the liberation struggle that they did.
Exactly.
And as you were making your argumentation, I also remembered recently the veteran, His Excellency, your constituency where you come from, in Adjumani West, His Excellency Moses Ali, aged 86 now, who still went ahead and said he's going to run again. So if anyone wants to run against him, is welcome, but he's still fit, he still feels the gas, and he's going to run again. But that's a very wonderful context from a political point of view that informs why today largely our political system is majorly taken over by the elderly. But let me just briefly also now engage with Elian. Then I come to the ladies. Elian, after understanding that historical context, history doesn't go without the law, because also law helps to reinforce reinforce the political situation that we have today. We have seen time and time and again from 2005, 2006, 2018, a couple of amendments in the Constitution that also helped to reinforce the grip of power by the government, but also by the elderly that we have today. However much there are certain provisions in the law that have tried to at least remove issues like age limits, among others, which they said will help young people, but of course it doesn't, because an argument that I think also we shall try and explore the expensive nature of politics. If you want to run for a political office, you need to approximately spend more than $100,000 US. You equate that to shillings, that's approximately 360 million Ugandan shillings. And the reality is, majority of the young people are unemployed and do not even have $1 million shillings in their account. But let's first start with the laws that help to reinforce the status quo that we're in today.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. And driving from what he has given us, the context, the history of this country as regards the youths and their engagement in politics, we have to first understand that before I come to the question of the specific laws, when you look at the youths, and as you have stated, that they have been given laws, the laws have come out and they have actually been able to be told that the position is actually available. You can even stand. No one has refused someone of 18 years from actually going to stand for presidency. But now the question therefore is that if now that is a hard thing for someone to tackle, now let's look at the appointments that the president makes himself. He makes ministerial appointments and he makes other appointments. I do not think that you need to first actually have $1 million for you to actually be able to get those positions. They'll just call you until you've been appointed because you have these and these qualifications. Now the president being the appointing authority and who actually has the capacity to change the current dilemma we're in, is someone who has actually, as you've referred to him, as someone who has been referring to the past. He always tells us, we who fought in the war, we who are in the NRA and all that. So that is the background that is informing the president we are actually having, meaning that when he's making his appointments or any thoughts about appointing anyone or giving someone a position, his background will be, what have you done for me?
So would you then say that the NRM government is more of a reward scheme than
Yes,
a meritocracy
exactly.
government?
It is looking at what can I get from you or what have you done for me. So at the end of the day, realize that the president will actually say, these people fought for me in the bush and all of them are actually having positions.
But Elian, on that point, we have ministers like Honorable Nyamutoro, who
Yes.
did not fight in the war, but she's a young person.
Yeah,
she's in the
but we're
government.
now coming, we're looking at the president of, that has been in this country for 40 years.
Yeah.
Now in the 48th, that's when they are bringing someone, and then they will show the whole public that, by the way, we're actually appointing these people always. But the entire thing is that he's always rewarding for his loyalty. Like, which loyalty do you have for the president? And then they would actually say that, okay, we shall give you this position. So he feels better giving that position to someone he's loyal with, and that person is always these people he has actually been a close associate with. These people that have actually been his agents, the Kashaijas, these people that actually honestly know him. Kahindo Tafires and all those other people. So he feels like coming to look for a one Drake Onen, even when you have good English and you're good at politics. Looking for you, and then they say that we're going to give you this position, he'll be like, I do not trust that you really
But
that
I'm not
person.
interested in politics.
So at the end of the day, going back to the entire thing of which laws have been put in place, the constitutional amendments that removed the age limit, that at that time it was supposed to be from 35 to 75. Then they had that constitutional amendment, and then the age limit was removed, and then someone over 18 can stand. But the real reality is that person cannot stand for that position. Because first of all, you will realize that they will tell them, bring 20 millions for you to actually get just a nomination. So they will be like, now, me who is now just like this, and I'm still looking for airtime and data, where will I get the 20 millions to go and stand for that position? It's very automatic, that's not my place to go. So it is very clear that even when you want to stand, even when the youth themselves want to represent themselves, they will never be able to actually do it, because the system has put that financial structure that only the people with the financial muscle can be able to actually take it up. So at the end of the day, we are looking at the youth being many, as it's the reality. The population is about 75%, they are young people. But then the issue is the people now who are on the other side of the bridge that actually being our leaders are actually being able to do that because they have immersed themselves with a number of budgets, and they have a number of things that they have accumulated over time. So they have wealth that they have created, and so they can actually manage to go into an election, to go into a political landscape, and then actually amass money. Because now that's the politics that we're actually running in for. That they will say that, okay, fine, you don't have money, but do you have posters? Do you have people you're going to pay for these things? You do not have a life you've started as a young man. At 25, you're still leaving campus, or you're actually just leaving campus to go and start a life. So that politics will become expensive to you. So that's why when it is to that end, I will actually say it's actually understandable. But then the issue of appointments is what is actually now the question. The president can actually appoint people regardless of whether they're actually youth or not youth. But for the purposes of these things, we see you've started out the Honorable Nyamutoro. And I understand it's a good move, and I actually think the president saw that it's a reality, that by appointing such young people, they can actually do something. Unlike appointing people who are going to just sleep in offices because they're also tired. So by appointing the Nyamutoros and the other people of this world, actually it's a good move. And I think he was just testing the river with one foot. So I expect him to put the second foot and actually appoint more people in the coming election. That's if he's the president, because literally there is something to do with that sequence of events that we are not actually questioning. The president might actually be the next president if things go as he is. So at the end of the day, he has to appoint more people, but in these positions. We might not actually blame the youth for not standing in for a position of MP, because they become literally expensive for someone to actually take them up. But at the end of the day, we are looking at the society itself. The society itself. What does the society say about youth being engaged in politics? I have actually, on occasions, had parents' views saying, I do not want my son to be involved in politics. I do not want my daughter to be involved in politics. Then I'll be like, so who will be involved in the politics? If you yourself, you're on the edge of dying, and the child you're leaving behind is not interested in politics, yet politics actually runs the entire society. So some people, some parents discourage their children from standing in for those things, even when the parents themselves actually have the financial strength and the financial muscle. They'll be like, I do not want to support my child going in for politics. They'd rather go for business and make your money. Then at the end of the day, the society itself, largely, the communities we come from, largely look at people that have the experience. We call it experience. I do not know where they sell experience, but people call it experience, that you must be experienced for you to be a leader. Now the question therefore is, what would amount to an experience? Meaning
like,
the age
see,
bracket.
Just to counter that argument, the likes of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the likes of Dr. Milton Obote, when you go to Ghana, the late Kwame Nkrumah, all these were young people who had zero experience in the leadership field, but fought for independence and moved their countries forward. Maybe the argument that people are trying to raise today stems from possible cultural and traditional values that people think otherwise. But that argument of experience, you can easily negate it with examples of people who came from nothing and led nations.
Well, I actually understand your picture and view of the experience dilemma. But we look at elective politics, first of all. Elective politics would look at a young man. Let me say you have managed, as alien, I've managed to actually immerse myself in the political landscape. I've gotten some money, I've stood for a position. And then another one person of 40 years, let me say, stands also and he's been in the village. He has also been actually active. I would also say I'm a law student, I'm actually active. I've also been doing ABCD at a grassroots, blah, blah, blah. And I'm also doing my best for this and this. So people will be like, okay, voting this young man and voting this gentleman we have been seeing always, the experience this person has is not like yours. And that is why we are, leave alone these people who came from nowhere and just took over power, because that was not like democratic as such. Some of them never used the democratic means. Meaning even today, someone who doesn't just have the experience, doesn't have the money, can actually just take up the country by using any other means, regardless of anything. But then elective politics whereby you stand, the people themselves refuse to vote for you, citing experience, that person is not experienced. Imagine Mpuga, Honorable Mpuga, is a member of parliament for Masaka. So currently, let me say, I want to stand against him. Honestly, it will be just like trying to test the people's faith. So I will be like, okay, fine, Mpuga has done whatever he has done. I've also done what I've done. But let me say now, I want to challenge him. People will be like, now, look at yourself. What do you know in politics that he does not know? You understand? So people would rather want to stick with Honorable Mpuga because of his experience than you who actually might have the new ideas and innovations for the people. And that is where the challenge comes from.
Sure. Let me just hold you there and bring in the ladies. This question is going to go to both Miracle and Precious. Looking at the status quo, bringing ladies on board, we have culturally and traditionally seen, and they have been pushing an agenda that, of course, ladies oftentimes are not supposed to be on the driving seat and are not supposed to be in leadership positions, etc., etc. But fortunately, the NRM government defied the odds. We have seen this government has put ladies at least somewhere when it comes to the political landscape. But of course, the likes of Honorable Miriam Matembe would argue otherwise and say, with all the positions that the women have taken over, where are they? What are they doing for the women out there? She oftentimes cites, you see your prime minister, what is she doing? She's just a mobilizer, among others. But let's just talk about, of course, the involvement of young ladies, young women. How difficult is it? Why is it that we are having very few young ladies getting involved in the political terrain? I'll start with you, Precious, and I come to Miracle.
Thank you so much. So the question is posed to me is, why are we having few ladies showing up? Yeah. So first of all, we have the stereotypes that have been there from the beginning. A lady is, how do we expect someone to just come and start representing us, yet you have your family, yeah? Everyone thinks that the family responsibility is for us, the women, yet it is actually an collective effort. If a man can leave the family and choose to go in for politics, why can't a woman do the same?
Yeah.
So those are the things that we actually need to defy. We have to defy all the odds as women. And then another problem that we might actually cite out, in most cases you're going to find that women are not supporting women, yeah? And of which a man is also going to put, there are some conditions to support you. So you're going to find me as a mother, it's going to be hard for me to push my girl, yeah? If she tells me I'm going to contest, the first thing the mother is going to say, men are going to use you. It is not a good space for you. It is actually they see it as it is going to be hard for you as a woman to navigate through all the problems that they have in their minds.
Yeah.
Sometimes actually the problems are not there. We just have things in our minds. Because now my mother and me are from, let me say, different dimensions, yeah? You find for her she's from like the ancient world, and then for us we are coming up, the so-called Gen Zs. Then you find we're having different perspectives. The way we perceive things is absolutely different. So if I'm going to explain to my mother and women, let me say, whom I want to support me and push my agenda, they're going to be the first people to throw you down. The first thing they're going to tell you is your, they're going to say, how about you do not maybe contest for an MP of that constituency, but then you rather come for woman MP. Because they feel like you're not going to compete ably with the men. So they're going to keep pushing you for those things. So if I am growing up seeing, let me say, someone being pushed not to contest for the constituents, but then for woman MP, you're also going to have that thing in mind. Oh my God, it means that we are not capable. It means that we cannot ably compete with the gents. It means that me as a woman, I can only compete with a fellow woman if I want to represent the people. So those are some of the things that we need to break down, yeah? As we keep on growing, also our education system is actually changing. So we have to do the sensitization. Like you said, Honorable Miriam Matembe keeps on saying, we have the people in positions, but what have they done, yeah? In most cases, you're going to find they're going to like do the mobilization, like she says, mobilization of other things. People keep saying that we are promoting more the girl child, yeah? We might be doing it through words. I can write an article about women, I can write an article about girl child, but then in most cases when it comes to implementation, people are not going to even go down to someone in the deep down things of the village. They're just going to come, go to the city, go to institutions, they come to Makerere University and they say we are taking these ladies, yeah? And then you're going to find someone down there in the village is actually illiterate. They do not know what's going on.
Yeah.
Information is not reaching them. So how am I going to know that maybe I can actually, there is a vacant post here, I can take it up if I'm not being informed, yeah? Every time we're doing mobilization, mobilization is going to the people who are well off. So you find we're having this gap between different women of different dimensions. So those are some of the things that we need to break down if we want the women to compete favorably in the same environment with men. So if that thing is not actually worked upon, you're going to find that we are having women being left behind. And another point, you're going to find that we, the youth, we are the ones to bring the changes that we want. But you're going to find we've had several intimidations, yeah? You cannot stand up to speak, because the moment you try to speak up something, they're going to start threatening you. How can you do that? Can't you respect that this person is your elder? You're going to find girls, it's I'm focusing more on women because the question was more to women.
Yeah.
So you're going to find, even if we're in a conference, let me say we have the vice president, we have the prime minister around, so it is going to be hard for someone to stand up and speak out exactly what they feel, because first of all, they're going to tell you have to respect your elders, yeah? Secondly, they're going to bring in the thing of, you cannot just speak to someone big like that, yeah? In most cases, that intimidation comes in for the women, because the men, we have to admit the truth, they are resilient, yeah? They're resilient, they are very aggressive in nature.
But that's the ladies out there who are actually very aggressive.
There are some who are aggressive, but
Yeah.
then not all of them. So those a few have tried to show their aggressiveness, they are always silenced, yeah? Of which, yeah, it is hard, but then now if they put you like in prison, let me say, yes, you're going to be aggressive, but then there is nothing much you can do. So those are the things that we need to work upon, us
Right.
as the ladies.
Okay, the same question goes to you, Miracle. Precious raises very critical argumentations regarding to a very minute number of young ladies involved in leadership today. She equates it to issues relating to lack of information, stereotype, among other arguments that she raises. What lens do you look at it? Because the reality is we have very many vibrant young ladies who are very vocal on issues of national importance. And oftentimes they're silenced, either because of gender or any other issue that arises. So I'd like to understand that perspective. Why is it that we have very few ladies, very few young women involved in the political sphere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, before I go to that question, I want to quote Article 32 of the Constitution, which deals with trying to bring up the marginalized groups of people, and
Affirmative action.
the affirmative action. So when this article comes in, they are concentrating on the youth, because I believe the women are also part of
Marginalized.
yes, part of the youth and all that. They it tends to, I think it causes a distraction, a kind of distraction, because when we have National Youth Council, we have a lot of people, most of the youth looking into that direction, looking into the National Youth Council, looking into all these platforms that our government has put in place to, cater for the marginalized group of people. Before I come to the question, I think that that causes, in the bid to create equality, it kind of causes a distraction, because everyone is going to be concentrated on that way, in that line.
Yeah.
Yet these platforms are so weak in influencing matters of national politics. Now, when we go to the marginalized, to the women, I think there are a lot of factors that come in place. We look at the nature of the political environment we have, where we saw the Kawempe North elections. There was a lot of, chaos, There was a lot of defense coming in. And trust me, your parent is going to see that. They're going to tell you, what are you going in for?
Yeah.
You want to influence change, you want to lead, but that is not for you. That is not a place for you. As a parent, they understand that. As anyone, I would understand that. So I think we should concentrate on the political environment, the nature of the politics, how it is handled and all that, because this affects maybe not only women, but also everyone in the place, because people are going to be intimidated in one way or the other. And then
So your argument centers around the militarized politics.
yes,
That,
because
that looking at, for example, the recent example that you quote, the Kawempe by-election, maybe you can even take some, we just look back in, is it 2018, 2019, around then November, the November 18 killings. And we also saw what happened during the 2021 general elections, the highly militarized politics, and of course the massive arrests that happened that took in very many young people into the cells. Up to today we still have some persons missing. So that reinforces your argument that when we have a militarized politics, unwanton arrests among others could be justifiable reasons why we have very few young people in politics. But I would also like to disagree still on that same argument, that even when we have the militarized politics as you claim, the unwanton arrest as you claim, I think that there's possibly bigger, there's bigger fish to eat. Just one thing alone, the fees, just picking nomination fees alone. Yeah, nomination fees alone, because you can have a one Rodney who is very competent. He is not shaken by the militarized politics. All he wants to do is lead this country. You have a one Precious who is extremely competent and ready. You have John who is extremely competent and ready, but guess what? They do not have the 3 million shillings to go and pick a nomination for.
that is actually right. I'm going to give a scenario of a friend, actually, someone just me this Easter holiday, about someone who was coming in politics. And he was very, very vibrant. He had the support, he had the capability. And then there were very many, but there were 3, I think. And then someone comes up. He's like, he has the money, he has the resources, and trust me, he puts a a deal on your table. And because you're young, you're still, in the process of, fighting for your future and all that, you actually take up this opportunity. So when we come to the financial bit of it, it comes in. Because there are people in these places that maybe when we quote the elderly, they have the money, they have the resources, and we look at the youths who are women and men who are really still fighting, but they want to influence change. They want to be part of the process of transformation in their societies. So in such situations, this comes in and you have nothing to do with it. Then another scenario is someone who wanted to actually come up for this, when I go back to security, this person was intimidated, someone confronted him And it's like, you'll have to, like he comforted him, and he was threatened. So when you go back to security, I feel like the nature of the whole political environment sometimes it is intimidating to the youths and to people vying for these places.
True. Let me just get to you, Rodney, and just quickly first rush back to our turbulent past, which greatly engraves our current status quo. If you're to look into most of the ministerial positions that are occupied today, are either people who participated in the liberation struggle, directly or indirectly, or people who have garnered support for the current government immensely in their region. In a nutshell, the argument that earlier on raised, it's more like a reward system. It doesn't matter whether you have the credentials or not. All that matters is you have done something for me. Here is what you get for your efforts and for your loyalty. Something that very many young people do not have because of age. Yeah, all of us here are disqualified from all of us.
What have you done for the president?
Yes.
But Balaam has done something, and you see.
Of course, as I said, either directly
Or indirectly, yes.
A one Balaam, because of his bivulu,
Exactly.
had his way there. Does the one John Alien have bivulu? Definitely not. So, looking at just that analysis alone, sidelines very many young people. The likes of Fiona Nyamutoro are few. I think actually one person, one young person in the cabinet, amongst an entire cabinet of people who are aged with an average age of 64. Now, how can we as young people prove to the government that we are capable? Because there's this argument that is oftentimes raised that Gen Zs are lazy, Gen Zs don't get things done, and yet when you look in developed worlds, the Gen Zs are actually driving nations. They're the ones who are most innovative. When given positions of power, they make very critical decisions that move countries forward. We are in a point in time whereby tech is moving nations forward. But what do we talk about in our media today? As you know, sports, gossip, that barely moves the country forward. And that's what very many young people are engaged in. And yet, we could have people such as yourself on this panel be on critical positions of decision making and move this country forward. What can be done differently to see that come 2026, many more young people run for positions? The president possibly, since he has the appointing powers, have more young people in the cabinet.
Once again, thank you so much. I wish, before I even go into responding to that, there's a very interesting issue that he raised during his submission about how culture plays a big role in sort of discrediting the youth and their potential. And I actually agree with him and his submission. You see, Drake, our country, Uganda, just like very many other traditional societies, is deeply rooted in its cultural values. To the extent that in most of our societies, age has been tied to wisdom, age has been tied to experience and wise decision making.
And a case in point is our clan system. You look at a system where the elder or the elders within these cultural systems are the ones that are the alphas and the omegas. They're the ones whose decisions prevail over any other decision. Yeah. And these are people that have the final say. And so what this does is that it creates a social hierarchy where the youth are sort of recoiled into subordinate roles. That those that are older, or the elder persons, are the ones that are at the center of decision making. And you see, this subsequently spills over into our national politics. It actually sets the tone of what we see today. And conversely, the youth have then been linked to one, being inexperienced, and that's a reality. The youth have been linked to immaturity,
Yeah.
and so now we see a situation where before we complain about the repressive kind of tactics by the state to stifle the youth within the political space, the society itself has already conscripted its mind into believing that the youth are inexperienced, and it's the elders that should be that should take on this particular position. So I think even our culture has played significantly in terms of reinforcing this dispensation. And then now to talk about what you asked earlier on, I also agree with the earlier submission that was stated that the current system largely rewards those that have somewhat contributed, either directly or indirectly. It is a system that rewards based on patronage rather than meritocracy, like you put it earlier on. So we see that most of the people within most of the current political players who have somewhat contributed to the struggle in one way or another are the ones at the helm of this country occupying those high-ranking positions. And so these people have also had decades of opportunity to create systems and alliances that have actually worked in their favor, that have actually further consolidated them in this position. These are systems that give them access to resources, access to state resources, and in most cases this is taxpayers' money. And this is money that has been used to further entrench them into the governance and the leadership of this country. So we are in a system that rewards loyalty over innovation and competence, which the youth bring on table. A system that rewards those that were part of the struggle or rewarding their children for the contribution they made. And of course, notwithstanding that there are some of these people that even when they are rewarded based on a patronage system, they are actually performing within these particular roles. The people that have actually provided service to this country. So it is a system that now rather rewards the people that are loyal, those that are praising the president, those that are praising the first son, and at the end of the day, they are the people that are having all these these privileges of sort. And so you asked what actually, as the youth, what we can do to ensure that we break this stereotype. And you see, recently when I was reading in the tabloid, I think that was New Vision, that was, I think, Daily Monitor. There was actually a consideration by the government through the Directorate of Ethics and Integrity to actually ostracize young people from the district and city service commissions, citing that the youth are corrupt, first of all, and now the consideration is to rather employ or have these people who are retirees, people who have retired, that these are people of integrity, persons of integrity, and therefore they're the persons that are fit to take on the roles within these service commissions. So that, first of all, highlights that there is a mistrust, right? There's a mistrust between the old guard and the current generation. And actually this rift between the two generations has become strikingly apparent following quite a number of recent events. We saw last year the finance bill protests that were induced by the youth. We saw the March to Parliament protests. So this highlights that, one, there's a problem, and first, a need to have a reconciliation between these two generations. And then the other issue is that for us, in order to sort of overturn this position, yesterday I was having a very contested argument with a friend of mine, and I told him that usually human beings, we are quick to shift the blame to anyone else but us. That before we even before even shift the blame, for example, to
government and how there is a lot of repression, there's a lot of stifling of freedom of expression. But as the youth, have we built enough capacity to be in position to actually clamor over these positions or the representation that we so badly want? So have we been very deliberate and intentional to actually build our own capacity to engage at such a high level, such that even when the opportunity for representation comes, even when there is a leadership vacuum, we are actually fit to take it? So it is at that point that I think that there is need for us, one, to build capacity. Drake, you'll agree with me and all my fellow panelists that lately there's a lot of shallowness, for example, to debate, shallowness to how people comprehend matters. There's a lot of shallowness to a lot of things. And there could be quite a number of reasons as to why we are in such a sorry state. But then there are so many distractions. You talked about how we are in a digital era where there are so many distractions. The youth spend hours mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, and very few are actually really interested in having very pertinent conversations. Very few are interested in seeking for knowledge, and very few are actually deliberate about building their capacity. And so I think now the ball ultimately rolls back to us, that there is need for us to firstly build our individual capacities as leaders, building your capacity to be in position to engage meaningfully with these spaces. But secondly, we now need to build capacity as a generation. We need to better organize and better mobilize ourselves. When people are referring to the liberation struggle of the 1980s, they actually, they conspicuously skip one important factor, and it was actually how these people were organized. It took a high level of organization for these people to actually set a blueprint for the struggle that brought liberation to this country. It was a coalition of the willing and the purposeful. So do we have such young minds within our generation that can actually stand up to the task and then be in position to have, firstly, these critical conversations about the status quo and how best we can meaningfully engage in regards to developing our country? Then the other thing is that back to I just wish to also just make some brief comments about our laws, as he rightly so stated, about the passing of some of these laws, like the age bill, that rather, actually, yes, the 2017 age bill, during the Tochikwata conference, where we saw blows flying in here and there. And this is an amendment that was widely contested by civil society, by opposition, which was dominated by the youth at the time. Though it ultimately passed, and it saw our president being re-elected into office in 1970, in
2021.
yes. So now the laws themselves are actually more of, they do not only benefit one individual, actually, they do not only benefit the president. They actually further root or further entrench a system that is revolving around leadership being dominated by the elderly. Because if you're to scrutinize this particular administration under the current regime, you'll find that it is largely centralized around elders. They're the ones that make decisions on top of being the ones that hold most of these high-ranking offices. So I think in terms of trying to ensure that we overturn this position as the youth, we need to, first of all, build our own capacity. Recently, during the Jacob Memorial Lecture, Norbert Mao, during his remarks, said stoutly that before the young people of this country think about taking leadership of this country, they must be ready. And that was a key takeaway from his submission, that before we even try to think about taking the leadership of this country, we should answer the fundamental question of whether we are ready. First, we need to build capacity individually, but then capacity as a generation.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much for that very wonderful submission. I think one thing that I would like to gladly say on air and on record is the young people of this country have been preparing for some time now. You find young people attending various short courses on leadership. You find young people engaging on various mentorship classes. People are trying to build capacity as much as possible. But the question is, when are they going to have the chance to implement the ideas and lessons that they're learning? Otherwise, we should just go for a short break. And when we come back, I'll just start with you, Alien, and get to you, Precious and Miracle, on issues one, on mistrust. How can, the issue between the intergenerational conflict that we're having at the moment, that even it's stemming away from just the political arena, but even going to offices or moving down to service as well. So that is something I'd like us to look into, but also talk about how we as young people can do better and move this country forward. Otherwise, it's been a very wonderful debate for this first half. Just go for a short break. See you in a bit.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. Just before we went into the break, my brother Rodney made very good submissions. And what I picked from there is the issue of mistrust between the two generations, the older generation and the younger generation. Not only stemming now away from the political arena, but also moving into the arena of service. And that is why I want to bring in my brother, Alien. An issue where I think it's very critical for us to talk about, the mistrust issue between the older generation and the younger generation. We are seeing that even happening now in service commissions in the district level, whereby they want to do away with the young people because there's an issue that young people are extremely corrupt and young people do not serve. An argument that I think, in my opinion, can be reinforced by the fact that we are largely unemployed and are trying to make a living for ourselves. But the status quo otherwise doesn't make it possible. But let's listen to your argumentations and submissions.
Thank you for that wonderful question. The people that speak about the youth being corrupt, incompetent, and unable to provide service, I actually disregard that discussion with all contempt that it deserves. Because honestly, there is no group of people that is supposed to be termed as corrupt. There is no group of people that is supposed to be termed as incompetent. That let me say all women are incompetent. That is a very bad picture for someone. There is that one woman actually who is strong enough to actually do their best. If you say that all these people who are like this are like this, you've generalized and as yet you just had the one secretary in your room that actually had issues with embezzlement, and you want to call every young person corrupt. So at the end of the day, let's look at the corruption tendencies and the corruption cases that we have had in this country, and we try to use our own magnifiers to look out for the youth that are in those cases. We are looking at the corruption scandals for Mabati. I'm looking for a young man of 18 years and I'm not seeing any. I'm just seeing the Nandutos of this world and the rest of the people being arraigned in courts of law for corruption, and they are finding iron sheets in their own compounds, and for some reason many of them were actually admitting that somehow somewhere they were having legs that took them there, and they were not giving serious reasons why it's not supposed to be corruption. But at the end of the day, they are blaming the youth for being corrupt. We are looking at the embezzlement in the government organizations, and the State House Anti-Corruption Unit has put up some rotol, and they're trying to check on this kind of corruption. And I'm looking for where they have found youth in these things being involved. Just that one secretary down there in a local council was actually found corrupt does not mean that all young men are corrupt. So at the end of the day, it's a very bad picture for someone to generalize all youth as corrupt, because the corruption cases we are having in this country that are overwhelming, we have never had the young men having the 100 million scandals. We're actually having the oldest man in the land giving it out and calling it a Thanksgiving. So at the end of the day, we shall be corrupt and start terming it names, that this is a Valentine gift, this is a Thanksgiving, this is an appreciation, and we shall actually not call it corruption. And we shall now come and blame a young man of 24 years for being corrupt because they found them, let me say, embezzling transport money, that let me say my transport is supposed to be 50,000 and now I just said 100.
But Ilian, irrespective of the size of the money, whether you are supposed to handle transport refund for your colleagues and you took away, let's say, 500,000, and the president goes ahead and, awards his colleagues 100,000, corruption is corruption at the end of the day.
Irrespective of its form.
Yeah, irrespective of its form, it stays corruption. But I think for me, the argument that I would possibly try to bring out here is the idea relating to the status quo that the young people are in. Imagine a world, let me first be ideal here before I come to the reality. Imagine a world whereby you have a very, our population is, we are at that age whereby we can be very productive. Imagine a world whereby young people are employed in places whereby they can easily make a living for themselves. Do you think a one Drake Onen would go ahead and possibly embezzle 500,000 meant for transport refund for his colleagues if he had a means to make an end?
To first go and fast track your issue on that regardless of the amount, corruption remains corruption. And that is true. Corruption remains corruption. That's why I started with that comment that regardless of who, there is not supposed to be a generalization. Now the issue is, what punishment am I giving? If you realize that, if you're saying that this young man who has corrupted and has had embezzlement issues, and now you want to say that all youth are supposed to be banned from those positions, then let me say we should have the same token of advancement to the people who are out there, that let me say those ones who have embezzled Mabati, who have corrupted Mabati, we should now ban all of you from the government. Realize that's what I'm actually being against. So at the end of the day, we are looking at a social contract. We are looking at, there's what in law we call a social contract that was propounded by people like John Locke, the Russells of this world, and the rest. They were talking about what we call a social contract, that when we are in a society, we make up a society, we give up our powers, we give up our freedoms to someone to protect them, and this, in this regard, it will be the government. By us going into an election, a ballot, we are giving ourselves, we are giving our support, we are giving our freedoms and everything we own to this government, so that in return, they protect those rights that we're having, those freedoms, and give us security and actually move us forward. And that is why we're going to a social contract. And that's why at the end of the day, when that is not returned, we shall actually end up going on the streets. Because we have an expectation when we gave you this, when we signed this social contract, that was actually not like on paper. But we signed this social contract in terms that I'm going to give you my ballot, in return, give me service delivery. So at the end of the day, when this person is not giving me the service delivery, I'll actually go on the street, I'll go on social media platforms, I'll go and speak about it. And that is what the youth are doing. The issue is, what are they asking for? So if the government is trying to push the youth down and down and down and delimiting them and denying them positions, let them go back on the drawing board and ask themselves the question, the big $1 million question. What is the problem? What are they actually asking for? They're actually saying no to corruption. Then why would it be a problem as the president if a young man is saying we should fight corruption? Actually, you should join those people who are actually on the streets and actually fight corruption. If corruption was your number one on the manifesto, because when the president was coming to power, he promised, he had this a manifesto that he had 10 of them, 10 points, the 10-point program. One of them was democracy, but the other was corruption. So I'm looking at the president who was actually saying that we should fight corruption. And now the young men are on the street saying there is something to investigate about. And now the president is coming to shield those people that actually are supposed to be put behind the bars. And after just recent, the 100 million scandal. And at the end of the day, we are looking at it as a Thanksgiving, but in reality, that is shielded corruption. So we are looking at it from that angle, that the youth are saying, no, this should stop. If the president has actually real virtue for this country, you should actually join those people. If the youth are saying we're unemployed, and that is okay, because that's, as the president, that is your role. You should be able to make sure that all the people in this country are actually living to the standards they're supposed to live in, because that's why they signed a contract with you. Go back on board, listen to what these people are saying. These people are saying we're unemployed, and do something about it. So if for you do not want to make sense of what these people are saying, the strikes will continue. These things will continue, and people will continue speaking about them. And at the end of the day, instead of fighting these young men, you should join them and empower them. So for me, that's my entire discussion on this whole thing of the youth, that they're not actually supposed to be branded as corrupt, as inefficient, because yes, they are incorrupt, they're corrupt, they're inefficient, but that does not mean that the elderly people are not corrupt. That does not mean that the elderly people are not inefficient. All of us suffer from the same disease. So at the end of the day, does that mean that when we say that the young man, 2 or 3 or 5 people or 100 that have been branded as corrupt and inefficient, does that mean that when it was the same case for your elderly people, did that mean that we're not going to employ all elderly people in these government services, in these bodies, in these particular organizations? Does that mean that when we had people of Mabati scandals, did we say that we're not going to employ everyone of that age again in those government bodies? That's not what we did. So at the end of the day, let's look at a better solution than us having people sign documents saying that we are not going to allow the youth again.
And what's that solution?
The solution would be, first of all, as I stated, let's go back on drawing board and listen to what these people are saying. So as a government, it has to sit down with its planners and then understand that, okay, fine, the issue is the youth are saying they're unemployed. If we give them these people, if we give them the jobs, would they actually be satisfied? Then they would, if that is the research that has been carried, they would actually say, if you give us a job, we have no problem with you. So at the end of the day, let's look at the job structure, the employment structure in this country. The present and the entire structure of employment is looking at the people who are actually close to the president. You realize that those people who know the president will be highly employed in beautiful offices. And the friends of the president will continue being employed in positions even when they have been branded corrupt or even anything. So let's look at us going back to the board and saying, let this person be employed here. The president can actually try to put that into consideration. That, let me say, as you go for I do not even know what he's always doing in Makerere grounds celebrating the graduation, yet all those people are just a bunch of unemployed people for the next future. So I'm looking at him now coming back to Makerere to celebrate this graduation and then say that, okay, out of these 1,000 students, 200 are going to be employed just this month because we have the positions. We can create these employment opportunities for these people. So that these people are saying we have a retirement age. Now let these other people, it's a policy that let the next batch be from such age of 18 to 25. Let them also be employed in government positions. It will be just time that they will actually catch up and understand. It's not about them having the experience. They can learn from the job. They can be assistants. If you have a minister, let the state minister for this position or anyone, a commissioner, be someone of 25. They will actually learn from the minister who is 80 or even 30 if that is the policy.
But surprisingly, most of the ministers that hold those positions do not even know what happens in the field.
Now that's a personal effort. It's a personal. It's not an age group effort, but it's a personal effort that you've been given that opportunity, but you've not used it. It goes back to what the two are speaking. That yes, women have been employed, but yes, some women are actually not doing good. Some women are actually misusing their positions. And so at the end of the day, we have done the best, and that's what we can say. We have done that. The youths have to be employed, and then at the end of the day, realize that if you put them into these civic spaces, and these young men are put into these positions, the issue of them now, of you trying to fight them, will actually never be a point again. They will actually find no reason to actually be saying that they have been disregarded. And that's why you look at the women today. The issue is before the NRM government or before, the women were marginalized, they were being pushed, they were always being pushed to the deepest despairs. And they were actually saying governments have not looked at us. But at the end of the day, we are looking at a moderate formation that from time to time, women have been actually employed. And in the current government, women have actually taken up bigger roles in this current government. And we're looking at it that this has helped them to calm down their issue of we have been left behind. Realize that it's now just on the grassroots that we're just trying to give the foundation a firm grip so that we don't let it lose. So that's what they should do. Let the youth also be employed in these positions. Then we keep moving steadily like that. At the end of the day, we shall have no problem because you as a liberator, you had hopes for this country. Meaning at the time you're leaving, you still have hopes. I don't know what he thinks when we are saying that how will this country remain when the president is not available? I'm looking at him now saying, let my vice president be someone of 30 years. Then let all the assistants be young men and women. Meaning, by the time these old people die, they are going to be succeeded by young men who have actually gotten the experience.
I hope that happens. Let me just cut you there and make the ladies. That's actually perfect. Personally, I am all in for the issue of mentorship and sustainability and looking forward. But as I said, I hope it happens. But let me come to you, Miracle. Way forward for the young women and for the young women and for the youth. Yeah, you're a young woman yourself, you're a young person yourself. Looking at right now, 2026 is around the corner. Youth elections actually begin this year in August. So, shall we see you on the ballot? Are you going to take up the space? What can be done differently to see that young ladies such as yourself are on the ballot and take up the space?
Okay. Well, I think for...
First tell us, are you on the ballot?
No, I'm not on the ballot. I'm
Why
not on the
not?
ballot. A lot of reasons.
All right,
We shall go into them
Sure.
later. So one of the reasons that that can be done, I think we should have a fair representation. We have no ministry for the youth, I believe.
We do have the ministry.
We have for gender.
Gender, it handles young people, it handles children.
Exactly. If we have a 75% portion of the youth in our country, and we only have one representation of a ministry that caters for all of them, that is not fair representation.
But you have the ministry in charge of young people and children and gender. Then you have the National Youth Council. Then you have the Uganda National Students Association.
Exactly.
Then you have all the youth structures that you have. Isn't that enough for you?
No. When you go to the youth structures, like I said earlier.
But also, you can vie for any leadership position.
Yeah, but when you go to the youth structures, I believe they have a lot less influence. When you go into the national, they have less power. You've talked about the National Youth Council, you've talked about UNSA, you've talked about, we have the parliament that is not actually part of government, but these have less power to influence change or to cater for all the maybe things that are happening on behalf of the
So your
youth.
argument is on having positions that have meaningful representation and participation.
Basically, in particular for the youth, because if we have a bigger portion of our, of our population being the youth, if we have only one ministry that caters for all of them, it is a very unfair representation. How are these people going to be represented out there? Yeah, how is it going to be fair for each and every person out there? When you go to the women, we have women MP, right, or LOVA. We have, and those are not allowed to compete. Okay, they compete with the overall MP seat, but we have a gap in there, and maybe going into also the cultural context, we need to fill that gap. When you go back to the girls, when you go back to the ladies, there is a very, very big gap between maybe the culture and the society. Yeah. Yes, people are in these positions. When you talk about the women, they are in these positions. But what does society expect of them? What does society deem what they should do? Yes, you're in that position, but you are supposed to, you have a level of, maybe a level of action you are stopped to. So how can we deal with the cultural context? How can we bridge up this gap that...
How?
Yeah.
How?
How?
Yeah.
It goes back to making sure that these people are involved. When we go in all over the places around, when you go in youth politics, when you go into youth leadership.
Let me just get you here. Let me get you straight. Your argument is women should get involved. Young people should get involved. Let me just break this down. We have 5 youth representatives in parliament.
Yes.
From all the various regions, inclusive of a national female youth MP.
Yeah.
Besides the youth structure in parliament of 5 youth representation, you have the National Youth Council, which has the executive, but also has other structures in all the districts. That means you have youth council leaders that fall under the National Youth Council on every level, district, village, all the structures are existent. That is how we're having young people involved. You look at, of course, the position for women. There's women MP. There's woman MP in all districts. That means when there's an MP, there's a woman representative that run for those positions. So how are we going to have more young people involved? Because you can as well run for those positions. You can either decide to run under the youth structure, you're 18 and above. You're free to run under the youth structure, but you're also free to run for any MP position or even the national an MP position in your region. So you have all the avenues. So what is the issue that is preventing you from running? And that is what I want the solution for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if all these structures are in place, like you said, and how we can bring these youths on board, that will go back into the financial aspect. When we have politics being very expensive, as you can see it is, how can we? I think we should have a different approach for the youth specifically.
But unfortunately, I think that is impossible though, because our politics has been largely monetized. You will not tell me you enter into a pitch of 22 players, and because you're young, they should treat you differently. Or because, let's say, you're in a pitch of 22 and you're playing football, and you raise an argument, oh, I am light-skinned, I should be refed differently. Oh, I am black, I should be refed differently.
Actually, the argument that you raise on that is like the illustration of a football pitch and the match would mean that, remember, we have the one for men and we also have the one for women.
Yes.
So if the one for women is going to be treated like the one for men, that is now where the question comes in. Like a woman who goes into the football pitch for men will not ask for that favor. But now where all the women are the 22, that means they have to be treated different from that match of men. And that is where the issue is. That they will say that the youths are actually being represented, but let's see how they do it. These things have been put, but they have never actually given the criteria. Personally, I don't even know the criteria for how these people get there. At the end of the day, I know how they vote someone for a presidential position, but you never know how they do these things for youth parliament. Those things are it's as if we're dealing with trade secrets, something like, I don't know. But at the end of the day, you will see people coming up, oh, me, I'm already appointed. I don't even know if it's an appointment. It's like a secret. It's like a real secret.
That is what we need to
Now, that is the issue.
That's what we need to
Imagine instead
just
of...
like the way you do not know, and yet you have all this information.
Yes.
Why is it that you don't know about...
Now, look at the headlines on Bouquet Day, NBS. They will speak about drugs. But they will never speak about youth parliament. That, okay, there is this position called youth parliament, please people take up these civic spaces.
You shouldn't blame the national media. Now that is the prerequisite of the Electoral Commission. Electoral Commission has the mandate under the
to do that.
To first of all give people all the necessary information they need to know about the election roadmap, the various positions that they're supposed to occupy. It comes down to the leadership.
And that's the first thing they should first tackle, that they should make these things known to the public. Me, who is actually one of the people who have just been exposed, I might have an idea because I know someone who knows someone, and so I know I actually have an idea. But now there is someone who is studying from somewhere but would have loved to get into these things and positions, but is not aware. And there is no opportunity because social media is something blurry to them, and the media does not also publicize these things. So if the media and the Electoral Commission work together to publicize the positions for youth, that actually there is this, and as easy as getting it like this, then it would be very easy. At the end of the day, the competition for youth...
I also think, as a young person, in this day and age, with a lot of information just on your phone.
Take initiative.
Yeah, taking initiative is okay.
You could easily get to know.
But not everyone. We are very many. We are 75%. So I do not expect everyone to have that initiative to just know because of social media. I'm speaking for the bush. I'm speaking for those ones. I'm speaking for those ones who might not have access to the social media, but would love to get to these positions. They're ministerial appointments. I think she can join from that. They're ministerial appointments. They don't need money. So how can someone be, let me say, appointed? That doesn't need them to first have some money. So at the end of the day, if this is known, you might find they can actually make the application and they're actually appointed. But this is also not known. So,
yes, and when we go back to, thank you so much for that submission. When you go back to the youth, he talked about speaking for the other groups of people. Like when you look at the youth participation in politics, it's majorly in the urban areas. Down there, it's totally dead or simply low participation. So if we have these people in these rural areas and they have no access to maybe information like the National Youth Council, they don't have the funds to go for national politics. But if they have these avenues, but they are not informed, they don't know about National Youth Council, they don't know about the parliament, they don't know that there are youth leagues and all that.
Yeah.
Yes. So it goes back to the systems of maybe awareness and lack of information.
But also, you take personal initiative. But let me get to you, Precious. Still on this issue, I think we as young people, we are in a point in time or in history whereby just by the click of our phone you have a plethora of information at your disposal. We oftentimes misuse technology to do things that oftentimes do not add to our personal growth and value. But let's just look at it from the lens of political involvement and engagement. Very many of us young people, be it a rural youth, be it an urban youth, we are all facing the same challenges. The challenges we are facing, one, unemployment, the challenges we are facing, of course, education is very expensive, challenges we are facing, health is expensive, cost of living is extremely high. We are facing exactly the same challenges. But what the difference between you, me, and the rural youth is that at least me and you have the ability to go ahead and articulate the issues that we're experiencing on air, unlike the other person who could also possibly have access to internet that we have and they do not have. So as a youth leader, right now that you are the 91st Deputy Prime Minister of Makerere University, I know possibly after university politics you're looking at getting involved in national politics, possibly running for MP or getting involved in the National Youth Council, among others. I know very many young people in this panel, oftentimes when they come, have those aspirations. But there are core issues that needs to be that we need to solve. Problems that are already existent, but there are certain solutions that we can offer to those problems that can help us move a step closer. One is the issue of information. We talked about capacity building, but also as young people, we barely put ourselves in a situation whereby we want to learn. So how can we as aspiring leaders who want to take charge of this country take more interest in learning?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm going to speak from a tech perspective, yeah? We always say garbage in, garbage out, yeah? So I'm going to be in my room or my hostel, and I'm going to be, of course, you know now data is like a basic need, yeah? So I'm going to be in my room, I'm going to be scrolling on TikTok. The content I'm seeing, let me say I follow a certain musician. Whatever they're doing is something I'm going to mimic, yeah? And going to the perspective of politics, I'm going to find whatever is coming up is violence in politics every time. Every time I scroll something, I see people fighting. People out there, people are they are protesting. But then now we see the policemen coming through, beating the young people, taking them to prison. And then you find me as someone who is seeing, it is going to create an illusion in my mind, yeah? So the moment I even start thinking about doing something, I just start picturing myself in a cell. And then you find, first of all, he spoke about capacity building, yeah? You already have something weak in mind. I cannot do this. So your capacity is being bent.
Your esteem is already
Exactly.
hit low.
So
Yeah.
every time you find you're going to do something, you remember this thing is going to happen, this is going to be the outcome. And then speaking on, okay,
But on that, because if you're talking about young people being scared of either one being taken into cells, two being killed, is that the price you pay for
no, like
freedom?
I gave two scenarios. Yeah. The first thing was garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
From my perspective, the people I follow, the content I see.
Okay,
the
but
things I
on
take
the
in.
argument that I'm trying to raise, the
Mm.
price you pay for freedom, because I'm quite aware at Makerere University, when something arises and these students are against it, you take it to the streets of Makerere. So now let's put away the face of Makerere and put it in the face of Uganda.
Okay.
The price that this current regime paid for freedom is their power, and we are talking about them, yeah, that have entrenched the system and have put it into their grip. So what price can we as young people pay for the freedom that we want?
first way to go to the price. No, okay. I'm now speaking.
Sure.
You're
from
building,
a-
yeah? You're building.
a
She wants to first
diplomatic
buy
part,
it
yeah?
before you
Why
pay.
why do we believe that we can pay the price through violence? Why can't we do discussions, dialogues? Why is it hard for us to go and maybe go to the State House as the youth without
Young people have been to State House before a couple
no,
of times.
they went there, but how did they go there? What did they
You
want?
see, the argument there is the older generation are terming our generation as people who are interested in handouts. What happens when the young people go to State House? What do they want?
And how do they? No, another.
Handouts.
Let's not forget how are they going to
So how
present
is
their issues? Yeah.
there was a time I hosted a panel when there was a gentleman called Makana. Makana is a youth activist who is, for now, is a very huge. He says when the violence is necessary, young people need to take up their arms and go for it, because that's the price that it
When
seems.
has violence ever
we
been
need-
necessary?
Oh, it has been necessary for some people. The current government has it in power. But please, the issue is I'm interested in the price, because maybe the price we as young people ought to pay is be so informed that we challenge the older generation with the information
That we have.
we disseminate. Right now, you as yourself, if you were to be on the same panel, let's say with the Prime Minister, even when people would say she oftentimes behaves like a comedian, she has a lot of information about this country that you as yourself do not
Might
have.
have.
Now you are an urban youth, barely goes to your village. So much disconnected from the realities in your village. I'm just saying, yeah, I'm not saying that you are. So much disconnected from the realities in your villages. So how can we, as the urban youth who seem to have access to this information, empower our minds so much so that when we speak, they listen?
Is what you're going to do is to have a redirection to the content you're taking in. Because now, if you're more interested in maybe how can we start a fight, yeah, you're going to find now you.
The fight doesn't mean like.
no, you're going to be
Yeah.
instead of like thinking of how we can have like a peaceful dialogue, involving yourself in diplomatic relations. So you're going to find that the content you take in, of course, information is there everywhere you go. There is information, and it is not hard for us to find out the information. But then, how do we interest ourselves in finding out information? So now, as someone doing information, I can say, how are we going to present our information? We know that we are the Gen Zs, and we are more interested in visual communication. Yeah, why can't we disseminate our information visually?
So what can you do to help disseminate
What I
information
can
at
do
your university to help
is-
people be interested?
By disseminating information through the right means and the right information. Because now, if I am going to say that maybe students are hungry, and we are going to bring out the communication, of course, not like everyone can access the VC, yeah? So what if now we use some other means? Let me say we create, we can choose to do some recordings, because now we cannot just come and go to, let me say, the main building, and then we start saying we want the VC to come out. You find we are there with our red gowns, we are doing a lot of way. That is not a peaceful way that we are going to get answers. Why can't we bring out the information that we would want information to come to us?
Perfect. Now, you see the same way you want to provide that solution, put now the face of the nation and put out that information out there.
It is what we have to do as the youth, yeah?
But you can as well start
So,
it.
I started. So it is what we can do as the youth, yeah? The way we want the information to come to us. Because now, assume the president of Uganda comes, of course, with that, he fought, he went to war. He comes here and then he goes at the entrance with his guns. And they start saying, everyone come out, want to communicate. Then you find he's just going to say, you have been complaining about the 100 million, that was like a token of appreciation. Is that the way we want them to communicate? No. But then if we want matters to be handled, we are also not supposed to be irrational when it comes to acting. We are not going to go to the State House and start saying, we want the president of the state to come out, come and be answerable to us. Like,
Perfect.
Just be sure.
Just like you
let's
said
be
that.
guided. Like,
So let us go ahead and inform our minds,
yeah.
because every time the president makes or writes, his argumentations oftentimes seem valid.
Yeah.
So how can you as a young person
Counter them.
counter him?
Change
Because
your perspective, the way you perceive
it's
things.
okay. Now, that's what I'm saying. You need to be so much well informed
Yeah.
to the extent that you convey your information in the right manner,
Mm.
but also make sense to other people. Because if the president writes such an information, even when in your hearts of hearts you say, he's wrong, but then you can't verbally
And
convey
I
the
think
message.
we're also having a problem where I am like, you find the president has written longer documents, and then someone just
Don't
goes
read.
in AI and says, summarize for me all the above. So that AI model is just going to get for you the key points, not exactly what is being intended. So
It's
there
okay.
now we should not be lazy.
All right. Let me just get back to you, Rodney, as we wind up. Your concluding remarks on this particular conversation.
First of all, I think the conversation is starting to get interesting,
Especially from
the perspective of
the one that you are
talking about of the
digital.
spaces. But then I slightly dissent from
The view that
Honorable Nasazi holds on the need for us to increase representation. And just like you rightly said, we have quite a number of platforms already existent. From the UNTA, National Youth Council, we have members of parliament. And actually these youth councils go as far as village. But now the right question is that, are these already existing structures functional? And I look at it from a point of tokenism. I think that in 1993, when the National Youth Council Act was actually passed for the first time, the youth at that time must have experienced a paroxysm of relief and confidence that maybe this time around our issues are going to now start being discussed at that high level. Unfortunately, that is not the same thing that we can say currently. In fact, the existing youth structures have oftentimes been used to rubber stamp decisions that are being made by the current political players, the current leadership. That we have reached a point whereby we are having yes movements. You can hardly find a structure or youth leaders that hold a view that is different from that of the current government or the ruling government. And so basically what we have is a semblance of representation, but in actual sense these particular systems are dysfunctional and do not actually have any meaningful representation. But then secondly, there is generally a lack of political will, I would say. We are having a class of elders who are in these positions who are very reluctant to pass on the torch to the younger generation. There are people that have held griply onto power and have positioned themselves as custodians of peace, as custodians of stability, and many other things in that line. And so the lack of political will alone shows that we are very far from actually leaving this situation or coming to having an end to this particular situation. So even as we try to maybe engage in these processes, trying to build our own capacity, there also needs to be political will, which, as far as I'm concerned, at this point, it is not there. And secondly, also, in terms of the monetization, many people have spoken to the highly monetized nature of our politics within our country. And I think that the best way for us now to actually increase and have meaningful representation of youth within our leadership structures and models is to actually create an enabling environment. You asked her that why is she not maybe contesting for a position in her constituency, maybe at MP level or a constituency member of parliament. Yes, there is a provision, there's actually an allowance to stand for these positions, but is the environment enabling? More so in the economic sense. Because you so rightly said that for someone to contest for presidency, more so under the National Resistance Movement, you'd have to part with a cumulative 40 million, 20 million at the primaries, and also 20 million to pay for electoral commission. to be a member of parliament, you'll have to part with 3 million. And recently in the by-election, we saw when many of the contestants were trying to get nominated, we saw young, energetic youth who were trying to actually also secure the nominations, but they fell short on finances. You saw that video that made rounds on internet of a certain gentleman who was throwing tantrums everywhere and trying to say they don't have money and things related to that. So I think that is a major factor in terms of influencing the involvement of the youth. That even though we are free to actually participate at such a high level in terms of contesting for positions, at the end of the day, there is a financial handicap on many of us. You can't tell me that averagely a member of parliament spent about 300 million in order to secure those seats. And then there comes a one Adreni or a one Precious who is very competent, but unfortunately, they do not have the financial muscle and the resources. And keep in mind that these people who are within this particular system are actually having resources at their disposal. Resources that are in most cases taxpayers' money. Resources that they have used or harnessed to be in position to maintain a grip of power. So in addition to building capacity, individual capacity, there is also a deliberate need for us to create an enabling environment where, or to create a sort of meritocracy where it is not about who has a lot of money, or who, for example, maybe who is loyal to the president, but a system that rewards those that are actually good. So for me, I think that the best way for us to circumvent this whole situation that we are in, on top of building capacity, is that there is need for, there is a deliberate need for us to create an environment. And this will take quite a number of stakeholders, more so the state and the electoral commissions, the institutions that we have in place, to ensure that, one, the fees that the fees or the requisite amount of money for one to contest for maybe a member of parliament seat should actually maybe be reduced to a certain figure that is very accommodative to the young people. But then lastly, I also think in regards to increasing youth participation, we need, one, to build capacity, like I've said. Secondly, there is a deliberate need for us to shift money away from politics and put it into other sectors of the economy. But most importantly, just like you said before, is that the reason why we are in such a situation where the youth have been discarded as corrupt, being mistrusted, is because they are actually engaging in these vices, or they are perpetrating this sort of bad behavior because of the status quo. So there is need now to have an overhaul in the status quo in terms of education, in terms of creating opportunities, in terms of employment, such that if we have the country can only be stable if its youth are stable. Sure. But I want to conclude, lastly, you told me to give my concluding remarks. I want to refer to the remarks that were made by Nelson Mandela in 2005 as he was addressing the youth in South Africa. And he said that it falls upon a generation to be great. And indeed, a generation can be great. And it also takes me back to what you have actually said, that for us to be in position to engage at such a high level where we shall not, where we shall, first of all, where our opinion will actually hold substance, where it would actually make sense to people, then we must take it upon ourselves to make ourselves great. We need to be deliberate about seeking out for information. He said that we do not have access to this information, but we have it at our disposal by checking on our phones. We should take personal initiative We should build capacity. At the end of the day, there's also a need for us to demonetize our politics. Thank you.
All right. Precious, your concluding remarks, please.
First of all, thank you so much for giving us an opportunity. As I conclude, I'm going to focus more on my focal points, the points that I've gotten from my fellow panelists. So we as the youth, we should interest ourselves in finding out information. Information is there, but we should interest ourselves because it's going to help us in capacity building and also raising our self-esteem. There is no way, even if you have the information but you are not confident enough, you cannot go and debate with the elderly people that are in office if you want to challenge them on any issue. So this is where I call upon everyone. It is your responsibility, your social responsibility, to find out about the information that is available. Yeah? And then another thing is, I'll choose to frame this in a quote that says, first make it exist, then you can perfect it later. Instead of crying about unemployment, we as the youth, we've been associated to social media most of the times. So what if we actually monetize social media, we as the youth? Because there is a lot of money there through influencing and many more. So let's first make it exist, then we can perfect it with time. Thank you so much for having us. Until next time.
Thank you. Elian.
Yeah, close the show.
My concluding remarks would include just a few tech points. One, I would look at the fact that we have said that the youths actually have been left out, and that is actually a true reminder that is supposed to be tackled. However, I'm looking at it from a perspective of an analogy that in a forest where they wanted to get the king of that forest, they organized an election for that to happen, and it was supposed to be through a competition. But at the end of the day, which competition was held, we had the fish, we had the monkey, we had the lion, we had the elephant, and the rest of the animals all wanted to compete. So they told them, no, we are going to have a fair election, and all of you should do the same exams, should do the same tests, and all of you are going to climb the trees. So we are saying, okay, all of you are going to climb the trees, but the fish will not manage. Automatically from the beginning, the fish won't climb that tree, the elephant will not climb that tree, but the monkey will be favored. So at the end of the day, when I speak about dissemination of information about most of these youth platforms, the information is out, but I'm saying it is accessed by a few. It is accessed by the, I do not want to speak about it from this direction, but I want you to look at the people who are always competing for those offices in youth parliament and all those people. Those people are actually highly connected people. You will never find there a Wololo that is just climbing up to that street to go and apply for that position. You find people who actually known. You will find people who are, the current people who are competing. I actually happen to know some of them, but you'll be like, my father is actually pushing me to do much of this, and I'm like, okay, fine. You've actually accessed that information. How about if now all the people who are actually out there also access this information? And then the last take home was on the employment.
That's your opinion, though.
Yeah, it is my opinion. Like, that information has to be given out to everyone out there. And then the issue of employment of the youth, she has given a good thing about social media. But then I've also tasked it on the government that when you're making these appointments, at least try to favor the people who have actually, because the youths who actually been out there and have actually had their marks, they have actually shown their competence, you can actually employ them as the assistants, so that as the time goes on, the generations do not die. At the end of the day, we shall have these generations serving concurrently, the elder generation and the young generation. And at the end of the day, when the elder generation is out, these are the people who actually will be there. But what will be able to be done when they do not have the skills? So when they're also put in the system, they will learn from there. So if a tree doesn't know how to dance, the wind will teach it. So they will find their way out from that kind of system. And they will err and perfect from such a system when there are still deputies and assistants. Then at the end of the day, the employment gap will be reduced. We shall not reduce it 100%, but the percentage of it shall be reduced, because many people are employed and not employed, yet they have the papers and the books. And that is so hurting to parents who actually have invested in this education. So at the end of the day, I thank you for this platform and for the topic, and wish all the best for the next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My conclusion remarks would be, if we have all these structures in place, like we mentioned, the National Youth Councils and all that, how do we ensure that they are actually functional? I think we need to go back to the drawing board and see how we can ensure efficiency of all these platforms, because they are there, but how are we going to ensure that they are actually functional to fulfill their purposes? And then maybe we should look at he talked about demonetizing, right? I think we should restructure the money that we invest or that the government puts into politics. It should be maybe put into employment creation. I like his approach of employment. If we have these people coming up, you know, being put in these places, being put in the offices, maybe state ministers, it could work for us in employment. And then maybe for the youth ourselves, it is an individual, it should be individual, basis, Like, people should be intentional. People should be aggressive. In every aspect of life, things take time, things take hard work, things take consistency. So if we have a portion of us being consistent, being intentional, being hardworking, I'm sure we shall reach there.
Today we've been discussing why is it that the second youngest country in the world the leadership is dominated by the elderly, and they've given us very wonderful submissions. But on top of that, my cry goes out all to all the young people out there that 1, get engaged in meaningful politics, 2, interest yourself in learning, and 3, Uganda is ours and will always be ours. Let us be the change we want to be in our societies. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Treponel. This has been brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance on Civic Space TV. Thank you very much to the production crew for making this possible. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.